Hello everyone, welcome back. So today I am continuing my shelf tour. This is the very top shelf of these two bookcases right here. These are all unread fiction books, novels, short story collections, and anthologies. And the point of doing this is not to boast about my books or show off about my books or anything like that. It is a chance for me to take a look at what I have and maybe thin them out, get rid of some books I'm not interested in anymore, and also to give you an opportunity to see what I have and for you to let me know if any of these books are good, if you've read them, if they're worth reading, or if you didn't like them. I'd really like to hear about it, your experience with these books. And so we're just going to get into this. Now, the first book is a collection or an anthology of short stories edited by Robert Bloch, Monsters in Our Midst. And I'm pretty sure that these are all about psychopaths, right? Because Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, and I think these are all about psycho stories and that sort of thing. I really haven't looked through this. My grandpa gave me this. I'm not a real big fan of reading books about psychos or killers or anything like that. I prefer to my horror to be about monsters and time slips and all kinds of things like that, not necessarily about people. The next is about, or rather, is a collection of John O'Hara's short stories. So I have only read one of these, or maybe two. I know that I read one about a hardware store, about a guy who works his way up to be the head of a hardware store, and it was pretty good. I have a couple of these. I think there's another one on this pile. I've heard a lot about John O'Hara. I tried to read one of his novels a while back. Uh, did he read? Did he write Appointment in Samara? I think so. It's been a little while. I couldn't really get into that. The next is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. This is one of my favorite covers of all the books that I have. I just love this. And even though it's a great cover, it's really not worth anything. And that's okay. I don't buy books just because they're worth something. It just seems to me like something like that should be more valuable than it is. Who did this? Does it say? Dorian Vallejo. And this is from the early 90s, I think. I have never read The Forever War. I don't know if I've read anything by Joe Haldeman, come to think of it. I've always heard about how good this is, and I've just never, I don't know, I've never had the right moment to start it. After that, we have one by an author that I have read several books by. This is Others by James Herbert. This is one of the books that he wrote towards the end of his life, I believe. This came out in, what year did this come out? 1999. So I have mixed feelings about Herbert. He's very over the top in his writing. He wrote The Fog and The Rats. I never read The Rats, but I read Domain, which is about a nuclear war. People go down into these subway tunnels, and there's a bunker down there. This is in London. And so there's this nuclear war, and then on top of that, all the rats are still in the tunnels, and they have to fight these giant mutant rats. And I've read several books by James Herbert, but I just can't remember which ones they were or what they were called, because it was quite some time ago. This is about a man who goes to hell, and he strikes up some kind of deal to get out of hell. I don't know. I haven't had that one for very long. The next is Andersonville by Mackinley Cantor. And the only thing I really know about this, other than that it's about Andersonville prison, it was a prison camp during the Civil War where the prisoners were deeply mistreated and left to fend for themselves, really, is that there are no quotation marks in this entire book. There are no quotation marks around any of the dialogue, which that is normal in a lot of languages around the world to not have quotation marks, but in English, it is very abnormal to not have quotation marks. So I don't know. I have no idea how I would react to that. I think maybe the only author I've ever read that didn't use quotation marks like that was it Cormac McCarthy. If I remember right, he wasn't a fan of quotation marks. It's been a long time since I've read a Cormac McCarthy book. The next book is When Christ and His Saints Slept by Sharon Kaye Penman. Now, I read her book The Sun in Splendor about Richard III. I really enjoyed it. I really liked that book. I blazed through that thing. And so I wound up buying a couple more of her books, but I never found the right moment to read them. Her books are all about like royalty back in the medieval times and their power struggles and that sort of thing. And I really just have to be in the right mood for that kind of thing. After that, we have A Soldier of the Great War by Mark Helprin. This is a great big book. And I don't know about this. This is a drama about a young man who goes off to war. And we are looking back on his life, I suppose, and his wives, and maybe his lovers and his children and all that sort of stuff. I don't know. That may not be for me. After that is the other John O'Hara collection. This is Good Samaritan and Other Stories, 14 previously uncollected stories. So, like I said, I have just really heard a lot of good things about John O'Hara. I just never have. He sits in that era of books where they're very realistic, right? And that is not my favorite genre, really, that amount of realism. I like things like this, though. This is the Salzburg Connection. This is about a guy who goes to Switzerland and he discovers, I think, a bunch of Nazis have escaped to Switzerland or maybe Austria and are living there secretly. I don't know exactly. So I tried to read a book by Helen MacInnes a little while ago, and I just couldn't get into it. I don't remember what it was called. I think it was called The Double Image, actually, and I don't know. It had too many coincidences. So I do have a couple more of her books, and I'm willing to give them a try. After that, we have The Stories of the Greeks by Rex Warner. So these are retellings of the Greek myths by Rex Warner, and there are all the stories there. And I did read several of these. One thing I really like about this book is that it has like this lavender lilac ink on the top color. I really like that for some reason. It's really, really pretty. I didn't get too far into this, but I had never really read the Greek myths before, and so I just wasn't really ready for them, I guess, because I spent a lot of time wondering what I was supposed to be getting from them, like what was the symbolism, because I really didn't understand the stories. But maybe it's just that the stories I was reading I had never heard of. I knew nothing about them at all, so I really went into it without knowing anything about them, and I think maybe I would react to them better now. Now we have a collection of Sherlock Holmes pastiche stories, New Sherlock Holmes Adventures. This features, Michael Moorcock, Amy Myers, H.R.F. Keating, Edward D. Hoke, Basil Copper, and many more. One thing I have learned reading Sherlock Holmes pastiche is that you never know immediately whether it's going to be good or bad, but there is more bad than good. And I have been burned quite a few times by bad Sherlock Holmes pastiche fiction, so I don't know if I'll ever get around to actually reading this. This may be one of the books I let go. On the other hand, I may go through this and read the authors that I know, like Michael Moorcock. I've read a few stories of his before, and that'd probably be a better idea than just trying to plow right through it, at least for me. And the next is a novel of Sherlock Holmes pastiche by Mr. Nicholas Meyer, which he's right there on the back. This is The West End Horror. This is the sequel to his book, The 7% Solution, which I really liked. I've heard that this book is not quite as good as The 7% Solution. That's just fine. So Nicholas Meyer would introduce characters. I believe that Freud was in the 7% Solution. I'm not sure who is in this one. It would be interesting to see. I'd still like it. Still like to read it. The next is a collection of Agatha Christie's short stories. I have a couple of collections of Agatha Christie's short stories. This is The Last Séance. I don't think that I have ever read any of her short stories. I've read quite a few of her novels, and I'm sort of on the fence as to whether or not to keep my Agatha Christie books that I have. And the reason is that I read so many of her books, and after a little while they all started to sort of seem the same, like I was reading the same book over and over with different characters, and maybe instead of, like, I don't know, a poison ink pen, somebody will be killed with like a golf club or something. And I don't know. I just haven't had an urge to read any more of the Agatha Christie's novels or anything like that. And here are 5 complete novels of Agatha Christie. So this is The Murder at the Vicarage, Dead Man's Folly, Sad Cypress, Towards Zero, N or M. I have read 3 of these. So I've read The Murder at the Vicarage, Dead Man's Folly, and I believe I read Sad Cypress. I'm not entirely sure. They all sort of started to blend together. I think that I probably will keep this one just because, like I said, I've read 3 of them and I haven't read Towards Zero, N or M. So I don't know. Maybe I will enjoy those. After that, we have a novel by William Styron. It says right here on the cover, a novel by William Styron, The Confessions of Nat Turner. And there is William Styron on the back there. I haven't read any of William Styron's fiction, but I've read quite a bit of his nonfiction. Well, not quite a bit. That's overstating it. But I've read a couple of books of his, and I enjoyed them, but I don't know if I would like his fiction. And this is about a man, Nat Turner, who led a slave revolt in the American South. I don't really know anything about it. Like I said, I've never read it. I don't know the story. I don't know if I would like William Styron's fiction, to be completely honest. This is a double feature, Death in Zanzibar and Death in Kenya by MMK. I also have her book Death in Berlin somewhere around here. We will probably get to that soon. So MMK wrote The Far Pavilions, which is supposed to be a really good book. My dad read it, and he loved it, The Far Pavilions, which seemed so odd to me at the time, but now that I look back on it, it makes a lot of sense because my dad is really easily captivated by big dramas and that sort of thing, and he told me to read The Far Pavilions, and I may do that sometime, but until then, I just have her mystery novels sitting around. The next is a collection of Arthur Conan Doyle's short stories, Masterworks of Crime and Mystery, and I've read quite a few of these. I have read most of Arthur Conan Doyle's short stories. I really like some of them, and some of them are just really hit or miss with me, but these should be interesting either way. And the next 3 are all short story anthologies, Masterpieces of Mystery and Suspense by edited by Martin H. Greenberg. I think that says compiled by Martin H. Greenberg. I always like the covers to these, and the stories in these books are always really interesting. Let's see what we've got in here. P.D. James, Eric Ambler, Michael Gilbert. I've read a couple of good books by Michael Gilbert, actually, and P.D. James. Earl Stanley Gardner, Dick Francis, Stephen King, Cornell Woolrich, Isaac Asimov, Donald E. Westlake, and Antonia Fraser, to name a few. I don't think I've ever read any of Antonia Fraser's fiction, so that would be interesting. And 2 more. These are both edited by Marvin Kaye. Devils and Demons. And these have these really neat wraparound covers. So these are all stories about people who make deals with the devil and stuff like that and how it goes wrong. Now, the thing about Marvin Kaye to keep in mind if you ever see his collections is that he tended to like weird stories. He didn't like gore or anything really, really scary or anything like that. So they usually tend to be weird stories in sort of a Tales from the Dark Side way. And so his taste in fiction is not exactly my own, but I do really like these, and I like having them. And the next is Don't Open This Book, also by Marvin Kaye, and with one of these neat covers. And I have several of these that I have read and that I keep downstairs also. I opened up to The Monster Maker by William C. Morrow. This is all about books with like curses and that sort of thing, books people shouldn't read. And I think there's even one about emails that people shouldn't read, cursed emails, which is interesting because this is from 1998. There's an Aleister Crowley story in this that I remember really liking, and it stuck with me for a long time. What was it called? The Testament of Magdalen Blair. It's called The Testament of Magdalen Blair. And if I remember right, that is about a man who he is dying, and he has them hook some kind of contraption up to his body so that they will be able to hear his thoughts after he has died. And it is a really messed up story as his brain starts to die, and like it's worth reading, but it is a really messed up story. And that is it that brings us to the end of this shelf. So, like I said, if you read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these books. And I want to thank you for joining me today. After this, I think we are going to paperbacks. So, I have a bunch of penguins right here. And I don't know if I'm going to do this shelf again because I've actually already done a tour of this shelf before, about a year and a half ago. And the books are basically the same. And if there are any new ones, I know I've shown them in book hauls. I'd probably feel really awkward doing it over again. But I mean, if you really want me to, I may do that. Let me know. Anyway, I just want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.